Pops in a pod. Pops in a pod.
Today's episode is a very special episode. Peter often talks on the podcast about his relationship between him and his dad and how Peter was brought up by his dad. So, guess what? Today, we've got Peter's dad, Mr. Subramani, on the podcast. There's something just wonderfully special about a son and a father reminiscing about the past and the way things move forward. And that is why I have decided not to be part of this episode and let the limelight shine on Peter and his dad, Mr. Subramani. And this is Pops in a Pod's way to kick off Father's Month in June 2022. I can't find a better way to start off Father's Month by having this great conversation between son and father.
It's taken me 3 years, and I don't know how many episodes, whenever this ends up getting released, to actually get my own dad on the podcast. So, hi Dad, welcome to Pops in a Pod.
Hi Peter, how are you today?
I'm saying Dad because that's what I've always called him, and then I think somewhere on my teenage...
nickname being a Pop.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I got it.
the OG Pop before even Pops in a Pod was thought of was
Yes.
somewhere on my teenage I ended up calling my dad Pop for no apparent reason. Do you remember, Dad?
Yes, I recall very well. And when I was recalling from where did I become a Pop from being a daddy or a father.
Yeah.
But it suited me well and it was nice. It was a nice name. Thanks for doing that, Peter. It sounded well.
Yeah, and it's
So
it's
now
so
I
strange.
become a big Pop for his son as well. So that's even a bonus, I should say.
No, and it's so funny because like even now I still have your name saved as Pop, and when you call, someone looks and is like, "Who's Pop?" And I'm glad I have your photo, and people wonder who's there.
Yes.
But-
Yes.
But it's a huge thing I'm realizing because like when we started the podcast, I knew at some point I would have to get you. Pandemic happened. Yeah, I have to bring this up right up front. And for some reason, I never felt comfortable doing this over Zoom. So yeah, I'm actually seeing my dad after over 2 years. So that's, I think, a good enough reason to get him on the podcast. What do you say?
Thank you for getting me on the podcast, first of all. And it is really indeed a pleasure being with you and doing this live. Thank you. That's nice that you thought about me to add me in your podcast. Thank you so much. I've been ardently listening to you and Nadir all the way. And I thoroughly enjoy your every episode. And as you rightly said, yes, even I was waiting for my chance. So thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that surprised me the most, that you actually wanted to listen to the podcast, because when I was going back and I was trying to wonder, like, why do I do this podcast? What's the reason? And of course, my son was one of the reasons, but I'm very glad to say that you were the second reason, because, you know, one of the things we always talk about on the podcast is how, like, our parents have affected our parenting journey. And the reason I say that I can be the parent I am today, or whatever I am today, is thanks to you and the way you brought me up. So yeah, that's me putting it up front.
Yes, Peter, indeed. I mean, to answer your question, I have to start with my own career path, which took me from India to UAE. That was all close to 40 years ago. And that's where, though you were born, of course, in Mumbai, I took you as an infant to UAE. Of course, you won't recall that because you were just about 45 days old. As per the norm, we had to wait for 45 days in India. And we took you to Abu Dhabi in 86, end of 86, when you were just about 8 or 9 months old. And as you rightly put it, yes, it's been a challenge there. It's a different environment where you don't get much of, social help from the neighbors. You don't have friends. because even I had just been in the UAE about 3 to 4 years, so we didn't have much of help from the family as well because we had no family members. So it was tough as me and Peter's mother, we both were employed, and bringing you up was extremely difficult and a challenge in its own way for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say this, and one of the reasons actually I'm really glad to have you on the podcast because now I can finally get your take on this. And I keep talking about how one of my earliest memories of my childhood is actually, you remember our house in Abu Dhabi?
Yes, of course, of course. I don't forget it even till date. Whenever I pass that park, I think of all the times that we have spent at Khalifa Park, taking you on a cycle, taking you on the rides over there, etc.
Yeah. So I still remember like being perched on this kitchen counter that we had, and my dad would be without a t-shirt,
Yes.
making breakfast for me in there. And all these years back, like at that time, I probably took it for granted that my dad is cooking and my dad is doing this. And like now, when I look back at it, tell me that, right? I mean, was that something? How did you kind of take on those responsibility, those roles? Because again, we're talking about like late 80s, early 90s there, right?
Late 80s was the most challenging because your early days, your early growing up days was absolutely the most challenging. I should say that because I had to make sure that you are fed, you are been given a proper breakfast in the morning before me rushing to work, because in those days in UAE I was not driving, so I had to virtually rush to work on my feet. My office was about 15 minutes walk, and in the heat I used to run because it was pretty hot. Summer days were about 45 to 48 degrees in the UAE, and so I had to make sure that first, you are fed, you looked after well, you were changed with the proper clothes, and then I used to rush to work. Mommy also used to have the same kind of an issue because she used to work early hours from morning. She used to leave even before I could leave, and indeed it was challenging. I still recall the day I was sitting trying to feed you a boiled egg. You were so hungry that you bit off my part of my shoulder as well. So that was one
yeah,
incident I'll never forget in my life. You left a big bruise on my shoulder actually, because I didn't realize that you had already had the two front teeth, which were quite strong, I should say, and I hope they're not as strong as what they were before. But nonetheless, I do recall that very well. That was the first early bite I got really from you, a big chunk of my shoulder meat, I should say. But anyway, that apart, we really had a good, we enjoyed every moment because being the firstborn, we had all the time in the world to make sure that you are looked after well, and then we ensured nothing went wrong. Though, of course, there was a lot of pressure from the family to say that, how will you all manage? How will you all manage? But we did it. We did it very gracefully, and we are happy. We are happy because it was a great experience, and with all the thoughts, all the memories, even crossing our mind for sure, and not only with me but even our family members.
Yeah, and actually, that's one of the things I want to dive in, right? Because I finally can ask you this question, and I'm sure this is a burning question some of our listeners also probably had, is what was the pressure like at that time? I mean, to add some context, today when I take my son out to the park, there are people looking at me and wondering like, what's this dad doing over here? Like, why is he at the park with his son? And I remember having such great memories of playing cricket with you, football with you, and all of that stuff. Is this like an Indian thing, or was it also in the UAE where you had primarily a lot
No,
of?
it was of course primarily an Indian thing. But then what I enjoyed most was, as I follow cricket quite closely, the only best thing that I could really get on to you is to play cricket with you. So We used to have a cricket ball and a bat at home. Fortunately, we had a very long passage, so we used to play some good cricket at home to begin with. And then again, we were fortunate that we had a very nice open park where the entrance was free for families, and we could take you there. So after doing whatever you had to do, we used to play a cricket game for a few minutes before wrapping up and coming home. So it was fun. It was fun. It was great. We enjoyed it. Both me and my late wife, we really had a great time looking after you, and we had a great time. We enjoyed it. Okay, troubles were there. You troubled us quite a bit in your own way, but that's the way boys should grow up. I think boys have to be naughty to grow up. They realize by time.
Yeah, and I think one of the initial lessons for me as a parent was one of those things you used to always say. When you are a parent, you will understand it. And now when I'm seeing it with my son, I hope he's
Yes,
only
to
half
some
as-
extent, every parent says the same. I recall my father telling me that, okay, you have your kids, you will come to know how difficult it is to look after you guys. So, yeah, I would say the same to Peter for sure. Yeah.
But tell me about like just within your friend circle and stuff like that. Like, were your friends also as involved as you were doing stuff for their kids? Or were you one of those dads who used to get ribbed that, "Arey, you're washing their diapers or you're doing this for them"? What was that like?
Like I said, being the first one, we enjoyed every minute. Everything was different for us, like how to change you, what to do, what next, and I had a few of my friends. I would say very few, because initially in the initial stages, many of us had come from the city of Mumbai, so we got along quite well, and we used to exchange notes. I was the first one to get married, so among all our friends, and so they all used to come home and look at you and say, "Oh, how nice, how sweet," and so, and by then they also got married. They also they brought their kids. Then it was like sharing your mutual details with your friends as to say, "Hey, what next now? Where do you take him for a checkup? What next injection to give him? What next inoculation to give him?" And so a common exchange of notes was there, but all this was done with no laptops, with no WhatsApp, with no messengers. It was just a landline call, or we used to all meet up at somebody's place, and the first topic would be about how you raise up your child. That was the only topic.
So basically, if I'm getting this right, whether it was the internet age that we are living in or pre-internet age, among that age, once you reach a certain age group, children are the common discussion.
Oh yes, for sure, for sure, for sure, definitely. You said it right. Yeah.
Yeah, which actually brings me to the next thing I was very curious to discuss with you is take me to that pre-internet age of bringing up kids, right? I mean, right now, if my son coughs in a certain way or if his cough is there for 3 days, one of the first things my wife and I will do is pick up our
Google.
phones. Yeah, Google and look
that,
up.
that Mr. Google was not there around that time for sure. What we would do, as I said, take help from grandmother, because grandmother's advice is the best advice you could ever take, because grandmothers always have the first instinct of what a child goes through, and obviously you were grandmother's first grandchild, and she was in awe of you. She adored you a lot. She still adores you a lot, and you both still enjoy the same kind of a relationship as you enjoyed in your infant days, and it'll carry on for the rest of your lives, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So the first call used to be with Nana. Nana, what do I do? Peter is doing this. Peter is doing that, and we used to get some home remedies. If that doesn't work, the next best would be that, okay, somebody's kid, what did he do when he had this or she had this, and that was the next step. There was no Google. Fortunately, I feel in a way it was a blessing that you didn't have Google, because I don't know. I'm not very a keen fan of Googling, because once you Google, you start looking at all
Yeah.
the symptoms as if they are yours.
Yeah,
And,
you're just three clicks away from a
Yes.
fatal disease.
So, but that those were good days actually, and we waited. We waited. It's not that we wanted instant relief for the child. We made sure that okay, the child at least responds to what kind of medication we are giving, what sort of food we are giving you actually. So it was different. It was not like how. I mean, I'm not saying that today's generation is doing something drastically wrong, but I'm just saying that since you asked me about how we brought you up, that's how I'm saying that.
Yeah.
I recall you had severe high fever. You had very high fever when you were just about a year and a half, and you were about on your way to the airport with your mother, and you had some visa issues. Your passport was cancelled. Something had happened. Something went wrong, and but when we touched your forehead, you were burning with fever, high fever. What we did, we took you straight to the clinic. So these were the ancient ways of trying to get over. We dipped you into a very cold bucket of water, and the doctor just said, "Stay out of it, and we taking care of him." So these were all very old traditions, which I'm sure not many parents would like to adopt that today.
Yeah.
The first thing that will come to their mind is put a suppository, and that's the end of the whole story.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from. Yeah.
No, but tell me about that. I mean, you talked about calling up Nana and getting those
Home
You know,
remedies.
home remedies and stuff like
Yes.
that. And I think those are one of those characteristics or one of those things and our listeners would definitely kind of relate to it, especially those who don't live in their home country, right? So are living as expats or have migrated.
Yes.
What was that like? Because I mean, you grew up in a certain way, going to a certain school and things like that, and now here you were a parent to a child and
so
completely
to speak, foreign land. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know,
foreign,
I
right?
know. But then, luckily, as I said, there were a lot of our own expatriates with whom traditionally at the early stages of my career in the UAE, we didn't interact, we didn't get a chance to interact much with the local Arab population or with the other nationalities, so to speak. It's only as my career took shape, I started getting friendly, or we got friendly with more other expatriates, like from UK, from few Americans who are our good friends. We had few Canadians. then there
But
were
tell me about this. I mean,
Pakistanis,
like at
and-
least I know those listening will say like, UAE, it's like second India, so many Indians, so you'd get all of those local remedies and stuff like that. But just in terms of like culturally,
No, before you go that, no, not during those days.
Yeah.
It was not there. Not as what free. It's available freely today. It's a big difference. I mean, in the early days, no. Many of the medications from India were not allowed to be taken into UAE. So no. I mean, if you're talking about from the like, let's say, like an alternative therapy,
But what about like food and stuff like that?
food also was very limited. We used to carry food from here. Whatever food you missed from India, we used to carry it, and we used to carry extra, like paying for extra luggage.
Wow.
And then carrying it all the way, because you didn't want to miss the home food, So
Yeah. My dad is a huge fan of pickles. So
yes, I'm a foodie. I'm absolutely foodie. Being originally from the south of India, I'm an absolute foodie.
yeah, so
And,
I one of the another memories I have of my childhood is every time dad came back from India, we'd have at least one huge jar of pickles.
Pickles, yes, of course, yes. And having said that, again, the availability was also very, very limited. You just had a few shops, maybe in Dubai, not in Abu Dhabi. We lived in Abu Dhabi. And again, driving was a challenge. I was not driving. So it was not so easy for us to go down to Dubai every now and then to get those things. So yes, enjoyed in all those. There was some kind of pleasure, but somehow we lived and managed our lives.
Yeah,
That's
and
how things went on.
I don't know why I never thought about this aspect earlier, but so my initial 4 5 years of my life, you never drove a car, and at least for those of our listeners or those who know UAE, it's not very like friendly to walk, right? Temperature, distances, and all of that. What was that like? How challenging was life then?
Well, the most challenging was the heat. The temperature was, of course, very high, with the exception of a few winter months that we had. But again, if you really go back geographically into UAE, uh, the population of UAE was not that great. It was not that kind of a touristic spot as it is today, or a touristic attraction, I would say. And so there were more open spaces. So the temperatures would really soar very high as opposed to today. Today you have more luxuries, you have more malls, you have air conditioned bus stops, you name it. But in the early times, we had to wait it out in the sun, and the taxis was the only way of commuting, and those taxis were not the best of taxis. Unfortunately, we had to again live with what was available. Yeah, so as I said,
Yeah, I mean-
buses were very not frequent, so public transport was not so systematic as it is today. So it was a different challenge, different times, own issues. But in all this, like I said, we were quite say about 10 or 12 families who were together. We were very friendly. We used to have our weekends that we used to get 1.5 days, live it up, all that, catch up with good old times, find out about their families, find out about their way of overcoming situations. So it was different and nice.
And I think one of the things I must add, right, is like as cliche as it, where you say like you have friends like family. I must give a huge shout out to my dad's friend, and I've known him since childhood, Ramesh Kumar.
He was the first one to, in fact, carry you in his arms. You were a 45-year-old baby, and he had come over. And since then, we have been extremely, very close family friends. Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of my memories also are associated with him. And it's strange that you said about malls, because I still remember very close to where we lived, there was like one mall, and that was our reference of a mall. I mean, it's like if you look back, it wasn't really a mall.
One mall, the only mall, yes.
Yeah, it was
that's
the
correct,
only
yes.
mall on Hamdan Street, and you had like a gaming arcade and stuff like that.
Yes.
But another memory I'm thinking of, and is about you taking me to the beach. I mean, one of the things that's remained consistent is at least the coastline in Abu Dhabi. And I remember our frequent trips to the beach, and you taking
Yeah,
me
beach
to-
was fun, Cornish was fun. Yes. Like I said, those are simple pleasures. Again, challenging in its own way because the beach was quite far from where we lived. So we had to take a taxi, and commuting by taxi was not the easiest of things to do. But we did it. We somehow did it, and weekends was pleasure that way.
couple of things, since we've brought up the mall, the beach. I think everyone who's listening is now very curious, because they've known me as the dad. So tell us some funny, memorable incidents, not too embarrassing, I hope, from my childhood that you'll never forget.
The one incident I'll never forget is you swallowing a bottle of gripe water, where we had to rush to the whole bottle of gripe water you had swallowed, and we had to rush to the hospital to, get the whole thing out. They had to make you vomit out the whole thing, and so initially it was fun. We didn't realize what he was doing. Then we realized,
and
it's
from my
time that
perspective,
we-
I think I was slightly older. I used to think gripe water was like this sugar water or something like that. So my memory of this is I would take a sip of that and then dilute it with water. So my parents didn't realize that what I was doing. But yeah, it would, as dad says, I don't think it was fun for them.
That's correct, yes. So that was one of the most favorable, memorable one. And then secondly, when I dropped you off at the nursery, I was concerned because I thought you'll cry or you'll refuse to get into the nursery. But I think you are one of the only child. I mean, from among the many children who were attending the nursery, not to even look back at me when you went in. And the teacher and the principal and all were quite surprised. They said, "Oh, your child is quite brave. He's not even asked for you. He's just walked up to the nursery." So that was nice. That was a good part.
But did you feel bad that
No, I was happy that you didn't look back or cry, and that you were happy to be among the other kids. So I was really taken.
And this I've
aback.
heard.
Yeah.
So confirm for me this. When I used to get my vaccinations or inoculations and stuff, I was not one of those kids who cried. Like I was okay.
No. In fact, I think your mother was crying more than you were crying, as if she had taken the injection and not you. So it was good. Again, that was a positive. So it was nice. We felt good. We all felt good about it.
By the way, this I've heard over the years. It's consistently stayed where I've never really bothered about injections, but it was surprising for me to hear because you always hear those stories of kids crying and stuff like that. And my mother told me that I used to actually be looking at the
needle.
when the
Yes,
doctor-
that's correct.
when the doctors
That's
would
correct.
wonder.
That's correct. Yes. I think the doctor also was quite amused that you are looking at the needle rather than crying or getting into thinking of the pain or whatever. Yeah.
Now, one of the things I also want to try and understand and just kind of see a contrast, right, is like in the last few years, especially when it comes to parenting, there's a whole talk about work-life balance, and there's the guilt on parents that if they don't spend enough time and stuff like that. Does it sound like a very new concept to you, or was that something that you experienced while bringing me up and my siblings up?
I think it was always there. It's always the same, and I don't suppose it will ever change. Only the way in which you have paid attention to it has possibly changed over the years, because everywhere in the world it's the same challenge. As your child is growing up, his early days, his early nursery days, school days, or whatever. The days that the child has been unwell, who stays back at home, the father stays or the mother stays, and how do they split their off days or whatever. So it's a challenge all across the globe, I'm sure, if both the parents are working. It's just not in the UAE or in India, but I'm sure in the other parts of the world as well. And that's where comes up the question of daycare, nursery, so many other things.
So since you brought up hired help, has that always been also a challenge?
Hired help, there we could not get proper hired help in the UAE in the early days, because again the visa work was a challenge. So all the hired help that you got was people who have bought their visas, working on a temp basis, working in 4 or 5 different houses to earn their livelihood. So they would run from one family to the other, and then if they are late, we are running late to our workplace. So it was a vicious circle. It used to carry on. So we had to ensure that everything works clockwise, or the hired help comes late. Who stays back till the help comes? Then again, one spouse will say, "No, I'm getting late." The other one will say, "I have a meeting." So
basically, this sounds very similar to what currently you have. Other than work from home, which I guess no one ever thought of that. Nothing has really changed.
Not
in
really,
that perspective.
not really. And when you talk about work from home, again, it's relative, it's subjective. In what trade you are, what industry you are, where you work, and does it work working from home, or are you a person where you have a lot of interaction with the rest of your office team? Like me, coming from a shipping background, I would say that working from home even during these COVID times was extremely challenging, and as a result, we started getting back to work rather than working from home.
So just to change the tone a bit, and I want to keep this a little fun also. And one of the things I really admire and appreciate about my dad, which I'm pretty sure all our listeners will enjoy, is that my dad not only is on TikTok but also quite active on Instagram. And I still remember the first time finding that out and being surprised. So here's a little left of the field question for you. If there was Instagram or TikTok back in the day when you were parenting and bringing us up, what kind of photos would you be putting up, Dad? Be honest.
Oh, that's a good question. You caught me unawares. I really don't know what kind of photographs could have come up on the social media, as you said. Today actually we promote our services on social media, which includes all your Instagram, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it. I mean, that's become a way of life for all types of services and business. So back in the early days, again, like I said, there were a lot of challenges which we faced. You didn't have a mobile phone when we worked, and we worked more efficiently. Mind you, not that work didn't work. I mean, work didn't carry on. We worked more efficiently. Like when I started my career early in Bombay, there was none of these available to us. I remember going on to a old-fashioned telex machine, and we were on the telex machine for hours because sending telexes was one of the most required thing.
Cutting edge.
No, it was a
Cutting
required
edge.
thing to be done. So you had to keep your overseas principals informed, and that was the only way. So we used to come home late, or rather, we used to come back late to the office on a holiday. So the trend of working on a holiday was always there. And,
Wow.
it's never changed. In Bombay,
So-
I had the Saturday Sunday holiday. That was officially the weekend, but still I would work. And when I reached UAE, to my bad luck, even the Thursday Friday happened to be our weekend, but still it was the working week. So
So tell me this then. I know you have this sense of humor, and I had during my teenage decided that your nickname was Daddy Cool because compared to all the other dads who were very serious and beyond your
thank you for that.
serious
Thank you for
demeanor,
giving me a new
you
name
have a
as
sense
well.
of humor.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure you would put up some of those funny pictures, or you would be like Snapchatting mom, my diaper pictures, like look what your son
Possibly,
has
yeah,
done.
that I would be doing.
That kind of stuff. I'm
Yes,
sure you would
yes,
have
yes.
done.
You're right. You're right. There, you're right. There, possibly, you are right. I agree.
One of the things about parenting, and I still remember I've talked about this in one of the early episodes of the podcast, where the first person I told that I was going to be a parent was I came over to your office and I told you. And at that time, just your composed and calm demeanor kind of was shocking for me because I thought you would be far more excited, or you would be, you would have some reaction, but you were calm. And I was like, were you like this when you found out that mom was pregnant with me?
No, okay,
And-
that was a different kind of feeling. Yeah, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. Well, no. Of course, when you were born, I was just too excited. I was on top of the world.
It's crazy to think about it and just have this conversation. I'm sure for you also it's
Possibly
Just been some-
because I was at workplace. You came and told me I couldn't do what I wanted to do. If we had to had the same conversation at home, I would have possibly jumped, and I don't know. I would have been behaving more crazy. So yeah,
yeah. But thanks so much, Dad, for sharing
Pleasure,
and just
pleasure,
spending
pleasure.
this time.
continue doing
Uh,
the good work. You guys are doing a fantastic job, and like I said, I enjoy listening to every podcast of yours, and I so look forward to the next episode. And if there's anything that in any way I can contribute, I'll be glad. Please do let me know. Drop me a mail, or you can Snapchat me. You can send me Instagram or what have you. Okay.
Yeah. So don't worry for all our listeners. I'm gonna add my dad's Instagram account, which currently has only one picture.
Yes, currently I have only one picture. Yes.
One picture, but that's cool. I'm sure he'll be pleasantly surprised with all the followers that he gets post this
Sure.
episode.
Thank you.
So
Thank
thanks,
you, for
Bob.
Peter. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Nazir, for having me over. Good luck and best wishes. God bless you all.
Peter, you finally got to talk to your dad on the podcast. It was 3 years in the making, and uh, how did it feel, Peter?
Well, to be honest, I was a bit nervous because my dad does listen to the podcast and he knows the kind of topics we talk about and stuff like that. So, when you go in talking to a guest who's very prepared and knows you, you're nervous. And then you add to the fact that it's your father, someone who knows you like from the time you were born. And again, it was also strange just to kind of talk to him about stuff, right? Because like we were talking about parenting in the 80s and 90s, and you know as someone who grew up then, I felt it was very different. But as we found out during our chat, it wasn't that different, right? Like the problems were kind of the same, uh, that we still face.
I mean, we are separated by few decades, I'm sure. But I think the belief in parenting will never change till the point where you are an active parent, right? Which I think your dad is, and we've heard so many such stories. So it must be interesting to actually talk about participatory parenting with him and then compare notes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that surprised me the most is just the whole kind of reaction to it, right? Because like one of the things I brought up to him was what did his friends and all of them in his peer group think about him being an active dad. And he said that they actually came to him for tips and advice and what needs to be done and all, because he was one of the first in his friend circle to be a dad. So I thought that was really cool and very supportive, I think, right? Considering now in 2022 we have this discussion as to why is this dad being so involved, right? So completely different mindset. And I guess it also had to do with him uh, living in the Middle East, right, where it's very different from here.
Correct. I think one of the major factors of being that responsible is when you are away from home, because you are already habituated to do things by yourself, so it sort of naturally lends itself to parenting as well. And I think that is so important, where you learn how to live by yourself, away from home, away from family and support, and then kind of see how your responsibility grows. And clearly, I can see that with you as well, Peter, because you also take up so many responsibilities, considering the fact that you and your wife and your a son are mostly together as a small unit of family, so everyone has to do everything, which is great.
Yeah, man. Trust me. It's one of those things where just being on your own teaches you a lot, and I think that's one of the things I really take from just my dad's life, right? Like him moving to a place in the Gulf where he didn't have many friends or family and things like that, and just kind of doing that. And he again, it was a very different time, right? It's you didn't have the internet, and I think, and that's another thing that actually came up in our conversation, right? Like what was life like with no internet, and parenting with no internet, where you're not googling every little symptom that your kid has.
Yeah, that sort of parenting was so different. I know so many of my older relatives keep saying that, listen, our kids just survived, but today it's so difficult to, um, considering the whole information bombardment that we have, it is so difficult to just not do any kind of research and go back being an 80s or 70s 80s dad, and it's like, yeah, you'll be fine, don't worry about it. But it fun episode, and as I said in the beginning, that very very special episode. And this is the launch pad to our biggest month of the year, Peter.
Yeah, definitely very excited for Father's Month this year. We've been planning this for a while. And next week, we have our first guest that you'll hear from, who's somebody who wears many hats. And that's all I'm going to say about him.
Yeah, that's another big intro waiting to happen in our next episode, or should I say the first episode of Father's Month.
So, as always, stay tuned to our social media and our website for more details. We'll be dropping some teasers about the episode, as you can follow us on our website, popsinapod.in.
Or you can just write to us on popsinapod@gmail.com. We're very active on email, and we would love to connect with more interesting people, parenting or otherwise, and I'm sure we'll have something interesting to chat about. But until then, see you guys in the next week, which is going to be our big month, Father's Month.
All right, see you guys then.